we can resume our work. So I presented you now the story about the 4 editions of the so-called Patna Dharmapada and the availability of a 5th text based on one of these 4 editions. So we have 5 available texts, and I also mentioned that it has been difficult to associate this text with a particular Buddhist school, but the majority of scholars who have been studying this text seriously have arrived at the conclusion that it may well be a Sammitya text. We didn't have any proofs of this quite probable suggestion. And in the course of my work, I believe I was able to find several proofs. One of them is found at the end of the Abhidharma Samuccaya Karika manuscript, which I showed you on one of the slides. The slide on which I told you that we have one part of the Yedamma stanza. And after this stanza we read this particular text, which is, as you can probably immediately see, it is a Dharmapada stanza. But again, in the same dialect, with the same linguistic features as those which we noticed in the Yedamma stanza. So you can see here, Sava papasa karanam kushalasa upasampadam sachitta payirodamanam itam buddhana shasanam. So this is definitely not Pali. I mean, you can see this immediately, at least if you read just the word kushalasa, because of the sibilants. Now, just to give you a glimpse, this is here the text, so stanza 357. Sava papassa akaranam kushalasu kushalasa apa sampada sachitta payiro damanam hitam buddhana, let me see, shasanam. There are several issues and several things which made it difficult for the previous editors to read properly. Now, what you see in my text is the way it is presented in the manuscript, and there are scribal errors there. We have upasampadam, kushalas, 1 second, sampadam. We have here Apasampada. That's how the text reads. Apasampada.
What is that next to the ma?
This one. Yeah, this is interesting. This is we will say semidanda. It's a word division mark. It is a feature. You can see here it is a bit longer. Here it is just a dot. Here is a bit longer than this dot, but shorter than this one. Usually it's just a stroke. It is something which you observe almost everywhere in this manuscript.
Yeah, it's up over here too.
Yeah, you can see it. You can see it at the top line.
Where the akara begins. End of the first line.
You have it here, for example.
Yeah, akara.
Akaranam kushalas.
And before
So
that, where the akara starts.
yes, no, this one. This is part of the akshara. Sava papasa. This is part of the sa, of the second sa. This is sa.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah. This is part of the akshara. But afterwards, after akaranam, we have this symbol, and you can see it everywhere. It's a stroke. Sometimes it is a dot, sometimes it is a tiny stroke, sometimes it's a bit longer. But it is usually not as long as a pure danda. But it is good that you notice this, because I mean we have this feature in manuscripts. Have you seen this in other manuscripts? Yeah, exactly. So this is not something unique, but it is a feature which we have to observe.
I mean, what does it mark?
It marks semantic entities, either compound or words, single word or compound. It's usually breaking some meaningful unit.
I mean, the one at the other end was apasampada.
Well, this is actually here the pada break. I mean, it is at the end of the first line, so you can say this is actually a danda.
Yeah, but it's not really, because
Well,
it's before the end of the line.
No, it is what is written is apasampada danda sa chitta pairodamanam. This is okay. This is sa. No, this is not ma. No. This is.
But there is no ma.
There is no. Well, the anusvara has been forgotten.
It's not a ma, it's a sa.
This is sa, not ma. Sa chitta.
What does ma look like?
Well, ma is quite similar, but this is not ma. You have damanam. Now you see here. This is well. That's part of the problem. You see ma here, damanam. You see the ma where my mouse is, and this is your sa. Yeah. No, it's not. No, we're going to discuss exactly this point. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, of course, the issue we have very often in many scribal traditions in India, sa and ma quite often hard to be distinguished, but and also in this script. But you know, in many cases you have to understand properly the text, and then you can arrive at a safe conclusion what it is in this poor image. So we don't have any doubts here. Now. There are other issues here, and if you look now at the four editions, you see that they present the matter differently. For example, Roth writes apasampada with an exclamation mark.
Is that Buddhanushasana, that last word?
No, this is quite correct now. This is also metrically correct, like this. If you have anusvara, it won't be metrical. Yeah, and this is also in Pali allowed. This is fine. This is if you like metric causa, but this is perfectly all right. But we have problems with kushalasa upasampadam, because if you read here karanam kushalas, and now that's the question: what is this? Is it kushalasu or kushalasa? Now, if you compare similar cases, we had just sa, like here, savva papa sa, and this is definitely not the same. And I would think, no, it's not. Well, but it's not. You see, that's the tricky part. Now, if you see the vertical line here, it's just a straight line. If you have a look here it is thick. And this is the U part, the ukara. Yeah? So I believe that the scribe has written here kushala su. Now, yes, now I'm not reproducing exactly what I have in the manuscript. I'm actually writing the way I expect it to be in this case. What he has written is papasa, and then with an initial vowel again so it's not joined, but actually this is not metrical. We have one more syllable here, so one we don't need actually.
This here, papasa, it's papas is what you have written in here.
Yes.
So there's no
Well, you write an apostrophe. If you write this in an edition, you most likely have to write an apostrophe because this is elided. Now this which you of course expect, should be elided because of for metrical reasons. Otherwise, you have one additional syllable. So sarva papasa karanam. If you pronounce this, you don't have any issues. It's a matter of pronunciation in a way. Yeah. So you can elide in such cases vowels. So you don't need, and you won't necessarily write sarva papasa karanam. You won't do it. Neither in Pali nor in this dialect. So it is perfectly fine like this. But the problem is, however, here with kushalasa upasampadam, because the manuscript seems to have, the scribe seems to have written kushalasu, and then the next word definitely starts with upasampada. That's what is written in the manuscript. Yeah, this is the initial vowel upasampada. Because of this akshara here, it took too much space and he couldn't write V at that place, and that's why he had to go a bit to the right. That's okay. I mean, it's perfectly understandable why the scribe couldn't write V, chi immediately after S. Now, Kohn has noted that the end of the line is unclear in the manuscript. It is possible that it reads kushala-su. So I cannot show you now at the end of the line. She has tried to communicate what the other editors have written, and in that case she doesn't communicate. She does not communicate properly everything what she has actually found in the editions. And concerning now this idea that it may read kushalassu, I think there can be no doubt he has definitely written kushalassu, and that's what we expect. If you accept that this is actually superfluous, so we don't have it basically, and initially the scribe, what he has been copying is kushalassu upasampadam. Kushalassu upasampadam, again with an elision of this at the end of kushalasa, which we don't need. So in an addition, I would write kushalas apostrophe upasampadam. Yeah. So in short, this at the beginning of this line is actually wrong. It doesn't belong there.
I have a question. You're calling this Sandava, right?
No. This is this. Okay, I didn't mention this. This manuscript is written in a kind of old Bengali, early old Bengali script.
I had the same question.
Yeah. Okay. Now I didn't elaborate on this, and this is of course important. Now the manuscript, which was discovered by Sankrityayana in Tibet, is written in a variety of very early old Bengali script. Some people call it Proto-Bengali. It was most likely written in the 12th century. This has nothing to do superficially with the Saindavi script. This is classic early old Bengali script.
And you're calling this the Sandava?
Dharmapada. The text is Saindavi Dharmapada, not the manuscript. The script of the manuscript.
It's confusing because you already established that there are so many names of this text.
We were
And
discussing
you
the
are
script in
calling
your
it
book.
as
Now-
Saindavi.
It looks different.
The text until now has always been referred to as the Patna Dharmapada. Patna Dharmapada because the negatives of this were found in Patna. The manuscript is written in a kind of script which until now people have been referring to as Proto-Bengali. According to my own classification of the Old Bengali types of scripts, it is early Old Bengali script, or late Proto-Bengali if you like. I'll call it actually Old Bengali script. Yeah, well, it's Gaudi. You can call it Gaudi. I don't have objections. But yes, I've written about. Yeah, sure. They're quite closely.
Gaudi has nothing to do with Bengali script. Bengali script evolved from Buddhist script. Gaudi has nothing to do with Proto-Bengali or Bengali.
Now, about 15 years ago, I wrote an article about the Bengali script. Those of you who are interested in this, I can provide you a PDF. It's a classification of the old varieties of Bengali script, so you can have a look there. I call this script Old Bengali or early Old Bengali script. In this stage, in the 12th century, you couldn't actually properly differentiate this script. It doesn't have still. It does not yet have the traits, the typical traits of a proper Bengali script. This started a bit later. In 13th, 14th century, we have already the development of pure Bengali script. This is a bit earlier, but it is typical of the eastern area. So I guess that the manuscript was indeed written in Bengal. I would even go further and say it was most likely written at Somapura Mahavihara, so in today's Bangladesh, in Paharpur. In any case, Old Bengali, let's call it Old Bengali, but this is the script of this particular manuscript. The text which it contains is the so-called Patna Dharmapada, which I now suggest, I have already officially suggested, to call it Saindavi Dharmapada.
Okay, now, this is where the confusion lies in my mind. How does this text relate to a Saindavi?
Yes, that's exactly the question. That's the most interesting part of it. And that's why I started with giving it a background. And okay, now I wanted to keep it as a secret, but you're so insistent upon knowing this. The point is that this manuscript written in Old Bengali script containing the so-called Patna Dharmapada, which I call Saindavi Dharmapada, was based on a manuscript which was written in the Saindavi script.
Yes, okay. Where is this manuscript?
It's not available. But if you look properly at this manuscript, you find proofs that this copy goes directly or indirectly back to a Saindavi copy, to the same kind of manuscripts which you saw on the slides and which I showed you also in the book. This is the script which the Saindavas, the Samitiyas, used. And this Patna Dharmapada is the Saindavi Dharmapada which the Samitiyas had in their own canon.
Okay.
Yeah?
Now, the Saindavas came from Sindh.
Originally.
Yeah, okay. They're from there, and they traveled all the way up.
Yeah, and in the 11th, 12th, 13th century, they were settled, at least communities of them were settled in northern India, in Bengal.
So this is, and then you showed a map where there was the locus.
Of the inscriptions which were discovered, yes.
So that fits to the area
Exactly.
which this manuscript
Yes,
comes,
indubitably.
like that.
Yeah.
So the route from Sindh to northern Bengal here, this is where I'm a little fuzzy.
Okay, now the Sindh story is the beginning of this Samitiya order. They were initially localized in the region of Sindh. We have earlier reports by Chinese monks who traveled in the Sindh region in the 7th century, for example, that the Samitiyas were well represented in the region of Sindh. Later, most likely because of the Arabs, when they came to this region, some of these Samitiya Buddhists had to flee. And they spread also further away, and they went also to northern India. So, beginning from the 8th century onwards, it may well be that monks have been going to other regions as well. And we have reports, and that's well attested in the 11th, 12th century, we have big communities of Samitiya monks in northern India. So at Nalanda, at Bodh Gaya, we have Tibetan reports about Samitiya Buddhists. We have, for example, we know that Jnana Shrimitra was, first of all, a Samitiya Buddhist. Jnana Shrimitra was also related to the Samitiyas. We have quite many reports about Samitiyas. The Samitiyas were well represented, and this has been for a long time a big question. How it is that although the Samitiyas were so influential in the 12th century, we don't have any text by these Samitiyas. Nothing has been preserved. Only one text, this one, until recently, was suspected to be of Samitiya affiliation. But even this wasn't proven. Now, actually we have proofs. I've presented now a number of proofs that this text is certainly a Samitiya text. And not only this one, I already told you about these manuscripts in Tibet with sutras from the Dirgha Agama, which are also Samitiya texts, which belong to the same canon of these same Saindavas.
Okay, now there are two things here. And there is that this is the Sindavi Dhammapada. That I haven't seen yet. And secondly, that this is the Dhammapada of the Samitiya Buddhists. That I haven't seen.
Yeah. Now, I'm addressing first of all the second point. The first issue is the affiliation of the text. Until now, people have been suspecting it is a Samitiya text, but it wasn't proven. Now, we have in another Samitiya text, this Abhidharma Samuchaya Karika, at the end, the same kind of dialect which we have found in these inscriptions, and we have the same dialect in the quoted stanza from the Dharmapada, which you see now below. So what you see below is a transcript of the quoted Dharmapada stanza in the Abhidharma Samuchaya Karika manuscript. What you see here at the top is the version which we indeed have in this Old Bengali manuscript. And you can see it is basically the same, disregarding some few mistakes.
So this what you have transcribed
Is from the Abhidharma Samuchaya Karika manuscript.
from the copy, okay, and
That is
an established
an established Samitiya text without any question. And because the dialect is the same, actually, even this quotation is enough to prove that we are dealing here with Samitiya texts.
well,
But
points in that direction.
yes, but there is one issue, and that's the script. Until now, all the other Samitiya texts which we have discovered until now are in this Saindavi script, in this peculiar script. But this manuscript of the Dharmapada which we have is not. Now, this is the issue. Now, if we can prove that this manuscript is related somehow to a Saindavi copy, as we actually now would expect, then we can claim that this hypothesis is proven beyond any doubt.
But I'm still not convinced, based on this one shloka here, that this is a Samitiya text. I can see the closeness there, it's the same. Do you have any other examples?
Yes, we do. Now, once again, you're not sure that this stanza is from a Samitiya Dharmapada.
Yeah, but it doesn't prove that the text, that text itself,
No,
is a Samitiya text.
it doesn't. It doesn't.
It
But
says that stanza.
no, it doesn't. But it shares exactly the same linguistic features. Well, like Upasampadam and like Sachitta Payirodamanam. This metathesis there, Payirodamanam. This is very.
No, I'm saying this particular shloka, this stanza, does seem to be very close to that
Yes.
which we find in that text.
Yes.
One example,
Yes.
where there are others that kind of support that. You have other examples of exact quotations in this text found in Samitiya texts.
No, we don't.
You don't.
We don't.
You only have one example.
We have this quotation in a purely Samitiya text of a Dharmapada stanza, which we happen to see in the same form in the old Bengali manuscript of the Patna Dharmapada. This is the only one.
Just one.
Yes.
Say it proves anything,
No,
but it points in the direction.
exactly. That's why, because it is not enough, I had to go further. That's why I had to examine this manuscript properly. And now to cut a long story short, it turns out that this manuscript goes back to a Saindavi copy. Now, when you can prove this, and I was addressed now at this point, when you can prove this, what would you say? Now imagine that it is like this. Would you accept then the identification? Yes, okay. Good. If I prove it. Okay. Now, I'm challenged now. Then I start straight away. So how can we prove this? Any suggestions? Help me, please. I'm not challenged by Professor Tsisk. I need your help, please.
How can you prove it?
How can I prove that this old Bengali manuscript goes back to a Saindavi copy written in a script like this? Please help me. Any suggestions? Well, if you have a colophon, this will mean that the scribe has been so kind to write, you know, I used a Saindavi copy. Yeah. Well, I don't know of any such kind scribes. Mistakes. Thank you. That's the solution. Mistakes. We need mistakes. We need characteristic mistakes, which can be only explained if we would accept that he had a copy in Saindavi script. No other script. we need very characteristic mistakes and very characteristic features which bring us only to a scientific copy, not to any other kind of script. If we have this, then I'm saved. Okay? Well, I suspected that there will be some nice guys like him, you know? So I start right away with this. Now, the trademark. A very interesting feature of the scientific script is that let me show you one case. 38D. Okay, now you can see this word here, udagra. You see this? Udagra. Udagra chitto, and so on. So we now need to look only at this akshara. This akshara here. Uda.
Okay.
How many g?
Uda. Oh, yeah, okay. Udagra.
Yes.
Where's the R?
But is it one g or two g's? Two g's. Yeah. Udagra.
Yeah, there's the R. Okay, down below there. Okay.
Yeah. Now, it has been long observed that unlike Pali, the language of the Dharmapada, of the Patna Dharmapada, is characterized by the frequent appearance of consonant clusters containing gr. So, gr, for example, or tr. These clusters are interesting not only linguistically, but also polyographically. And in this regard, gr and tr are particularly noteworthy. The systematic analysis of our codex let us establish that the cluster of the voiced unaspirated velar stop and the sonorant occurs 23 times. Quite significantly, the cluster gr appears only twice, whereas in all other cases, the ligature ggr has been written. So these are the passages where we have gr and ggr. And you can see that we have only two cases, aragrer and samagri, with single g and r. In all other cases, we have ggr. Are you aware of any scribal tradition in India where they consistently write ggr in any position? At the beginning, in the middle of the word, before long vowel, before short vowel, anywhere. Are you aware of any Indian script in which there is this doubling of g with r? Professor Tisk? I'm aware of one single one. I'm not aware of Dravidian, but I don't believe that this place, any row here, anyway, with rather to the north. In the Saindava script, consistently, they always, without exception, use gagara. Which suggests that the old Bengali scribe has been admirably careful to replicate what he has seen in his copy. And that's why, in a case like Udagra, he writes Udagra, indeed with double G. Only twice, I suppose, he wasn't careful enough. And it was, I mean, it's something which is quite peculiar. Yeah? And now, you ask, of course, how it comes that in the Saindava script we have Gagara. Okay, now let me show you. Okay, now this is from this green book, which will be now part of the library at Bori. So you can check it later if you like. This is here Gagara in the Saindava script. Now this here, the right side, is the arrow. It's not the characteristic part of the letter. The characteristic part is this here. This element here, the curve up to the top, is the R element. One G, second G, and whoops with a loop is the R element. Okay. This is the way they write Gagara in the Saindava script. Now, we actually expect Gr in Udagra. There is no reason, no linguistic reason to not have Udagra. If you now just try to remember how this looks like, and if you now try to imagine how Gr would look like,
In Saindava script, Gra is always written with double G.
exactly. It seems that in this script there was the persistent convention to write always Gagara in any case, when you have Gr. But of course, it is very reasonable to ask why. I mean, there is no linguistic reason for this. And now, of course, I ask also myself how it comes that they don't write Gr. And my only explanation is, I don't know whether it is convincing enough, but it is that, let me see now what I can find. Okay. Now, if you write only G and R, it will look like this. You see this akshara here? Let me see. And this akshara here. This is Gagara, and this is Re. If you suspected, if you wanted to write only Gr, then actually you arrive at this akshara. So it will be Re. And I suspect that at the time when they have been designing this script, the font specialists, so to say, the Saindava font specialists had a problem. They couldn't actually write Gr, because graphically it would have been the same as Re. It would have been the same. They couldn't differentiate this. And I suspect that for this reason, the convention was introduced to write in each case double G with R.
But if you look at Trey
Yes.
and Gara,
Yeah.
other than that little arrow, second arrow,
This and this.
no, the one right
Tre. Yeah.
this
Yeah.
and the one there.
Yeah.
Other than that second little
Yeah.
triangle,
Yeah.
They're pretty damn close.
Yeah, they're pretty damn close, but you can still differentiate them. You have to be careful. Well, that's why I have inserted this in a table which is entitled, you can see, I think appropriately, similar characters.
No, but my question is there only this one cluster written in this manner, or there are some other clusters where for the graphical reasons these are written like double go, like you have that double the and
I don't have other examples, other occasions of other aksharas where a doubling has been introduced but you know, it is just by chance that if you would write gra, it will be the same result as re. In the other case, it simply doesn't happen, so it's not necessary to introduce any other tricks like this. But of course, if you study this script systematically, you'll notice that the script has been designed. It is very carefully executed. You can call it almost artificial in a way, because it was too carefully designed. In any case, it has been widely used by the Samitiyas, at least in the 11th, 12th century, with this interesting feature of gagara, which we find in all the other Saindavi materials which we have, without exception. And now I find the same feature in this old Bengali manuscript. Now, Professor Tsisk, do you have any other suggestion and explanation how it comes? I don't have any other. The suspicion is, interesting. We have a text which we suspect is of Samitiya affiliation. We know that the Samitiyas were called Saindavas. We know that they use Saindavi script. And we have now in this old Bengali manuscript, a text which is supposedly a Samitiya text, we have this interesting orthographic feature with gagara. Quite interesting. Now the problem is that the editors have quite often disregarded this feature in their edition. They either didn't properly read the gagara, or they simply ignored it. And this is actually quite crucial to understand that this old Bengali manuscript goes back to a Saindavi copy.
You have another example of the gagara.
Yes, sure. Let's say 127b. Here, evam grame. Now, of course, it is interesting to see how he has written gr, only gr. Samagri in 68c. Samagri. You see here? Simple gr. Only two cases in a manuscript containing almost 400 stanzas. No, 400, even more than 400. Yeah, 414. So, pretty systematic. More than 20 cases of gagara and only twice simple gra. So this immediately, I immediately spotted this because I knew, I know the scientific script, and I knew, oh, this is an interesting feature, and this fits so well, you cannot explain it in a different manner. And then it was the clue. I mean, from there it started. So after I had this feature, I was made sensitive. We have a number of passages in the so-called Patna Dharmapada which were inexplicable. We couldn't understand how this mistake has occurred. And I will show you now a number of mistakes.
Now, I would not call that a mistake.
No, this is no mistake. This is no mistake. This is just orthographic feature, which this scribe has admirably reproduced. Thanks goodness, he has been really good. He's a good scribe. But we have mistakes in this copy, and you said mistakes. That's important. If we have a number of peculiar mistakes, which can be explained only if we assume that he has misread a Saindavi, a word written in Saindavi script, then it will be proven. Now we have this orthographic feature, and if we have a number of peculiar mistakes which can be explained only with the help of the Saindavi script, then I think anyone will have to say, okay, you're right. So, of course, I proceeded with this and I checked a number of peculiar mistakes. No. Now I'll show you in stanza 378. There are several problems here, but for us now the most important thing is the last pada, where we have Save Sangrama Muttamo. 378. Again, the double G, very nice. Sangrama Muttamo. There is no doubt about the reading. It's correct. Sangrama Muttamo. The reading which Kohn has given is indeed Sangrama Muttamo, as you see, so in the manuscript and in her edition. Mitsuno has written Sangrama Muttamo. This ma is just a connecting consonant. Roth has Sangrama Muttamo. Shukla writes Sangramam Uttamo. In the corresponding versions of the Dharmapada, in the Pali Dharmapada, we have Sangama Juttamo. In the Gandhari Dharmapada, we have Sagamo Uttamo. And in the Udana Varga, we have Sangrama Durjayah. Now, for us, the most important thing is the Pali parallel. In Pali, we have Sangrama Juttamo. In our manuscript, we read definitely Sangrama Muttamo as given by the editors. Kohn has speculated that if the Dharmapada compound was transmitted through a dialect where J became Y, the Patna scribe might have understood Y as a Sandhi consonant and substituted M. Or if it was transmitted through a dialect where J was lost completely, for example, the Gandhari Dharmapada, Patna might then have added a Sandhi Ma. Okay? I showed you already this table of the similar letters in the Saindavi script. Now, the Saindavi J letter is very peculiar. I will show you first of all the basic letters. This is the J. It is a letter which, because of its outline, makes difficulty to any user of North Indian scripts. It's an unusual form, which you hardly see like this in other Indian scripts. Now, if you have a look at Ju and Mu, see what happens. This is the Ju here. And this is the Mu. Now, imagine in a manuscript which wasn't very nicely written, or imagine a scribe who wasn't extremely careful. If this element here is a bit narrow or almost closed, then it's this akshara. You understand what has happened? Most likely, the Bengali scribe had a copy with Sangrama Juttamo, but because he wasn't that careful and he wasn't that trained to read this peculiar J, or perhaps because there was some ink or it was a bit narrow, he didn't identify this as J, but he thought it is Ma.
Well, looking at the scripts chart from before, like where was it, Shasa or whatever, something like
Yeah.
that. I mean, I could not distinguish the differences in them. If we go back to some of them, which would, to my mind, create more confusion for a scribe who is not familiar with the text, to then say this. That was my first impression. You had shown it before where we were.
You mean this here, probably. The ksha at the left corner, in the left corner up there. Do you mean this one?
Even that, or
Well, of course, there are a number of aksharas which can be confused. If you're not...
these are more confusing than that.
Well, they are. I mean, of course they are. That's why you won't find Ju and Mu. I'm not quite sure, but I think I didn't write it in the similar letters. But I think that this is the most probable explanation why we find in the Old Bengali manuscript Sangrama Muttamo instead of Sangrama Juttamo, which we expect. And there is no linguistic explanation for this. I mean, Kohn has been suspecting something, but I think it is actually now useless. It can be easily explained paleographically. When we know that the Old Bengali manuscript is based on a Saindavi copy, whether directly or indirectly is not important, but he certainly goes back to a Saindavi copy which had Gagara and many other features. We don't have time now to go into all these details, but there are a number of features and a number of characteristic mistakes which confirm this suspicion. So much so that it may be held for proven. And in the case of Mu and Juttamo, it is quite likely that there was something here, so he couldn't properly read Ju, and he thought, this is Mu. Just imagine if this line here is a bit thinner. Then you can already... the other way around. Actually, you need something here to confuse Ju with Mu. But it could go in both directions.
I can see what you're saying, but why didn't he confuse you and Dave?
Well, he confused several other things.
I mean, that would be confusing to me. That would be my impression.
Well, I can show you something else. We have a case where I think J and Do have been confused. Now I'll show you how J looks. You have it here actually. You see J and Do. You see now in the case of J and Do, if you forget this here, if this line is not the middle one, if it is not long enough, then a scribe who reads this with a shorter line in the middle, he may think, this is Do. Or the other way around, if here this element protrudes a little bit further, he may think that this is not Do but J. It may go in both directions. And now you see in a stanza which is quite near to our Sangrama Muttama, we have in the all editions they read Jeta, wrote, added a note suggesting Jeta, wrongly for Dveda. The Pali Dhammapada reads Dveda, and the Udana Varga reads Dvaida. In line with my general hypothesis that we are dealing here with a copy of a Saindavi copy, I now have suggested that this Jeta is the result of a confusion of a Saindavi J, of a Saindavi Do with J. So the scribe had in his manuscript Do, and he has misinterpreted this for J.
Go back. What was it? The two words
Jeta and Doda. Now,
Jeta and
the manuscript reads Jeta.
the manuscript reads Jeta.
Yeah, I'll show you. 375.
Because there's also they, the DV.
Here, this is Jeta. You see Jeta? Etam Jeta. So J is certain in this script in Old Bengali and Ta is certain. But we actually don't expect this. I mean, the Pali has Dveda, Udana Varga has Dvaida, and we suddenly have Jeta. And they couldn't...
Where's the da and ta?
In Saindavi.
You have do da
Yeah.
versus j ta.
Yes.
So you've got two problems.
Yes. Sure.
You've got ja and da and
Yes, and miraculously I have solution for both problems. So I showed you J and Do, and I'll show you now Da and Ta. Now, in any northern Indian type of script, Nevari, Bengali, Ta and Da actually not to be confused. That's quite different. There is hardly any opportunity to confuse both aksharas. Now, have a look at Ta and Da. You see the difference in this script, it's only this tiny stroke in the middle of Ta. If you don't see it properly, if you don't write it properly, then you read Da. If, on the contrary, in the dha, you just write something in the middle, then you're going to misread dha as tha. And that's what I suspect has happened. He took and signed the vidha for signed the vidha and wrote at the end and tha.
Overall, I would say the most compelling argument is that of the double G in both forms. These are possibilities, but still not that compelling,
Well,
in my opinion.
individually, if you take it individually, then you won't believe it. But the cumulative evidence, if you regard everything together, then I think it becomes quite plausible. But even without these mistakes, even as you say, the GG feature would be enough, in combination with all the other propositions and hypotheses about the Saindhavi Samitiya affiliation. But then, if you start looking closely, then you get a number of such cases which are otherwise absolutely inexplicable, and then you start realizing that a number of them, like this Samgramo Juttamo, I don't think that anyone can propose right now a more plausible solution. But of course, until now, nobody suspected that the Saindhavi script has anything to do with this old Bengali manuscript, so nobody could make this connection. Now that we know that there is this connection, definitely, and this is beyond any doubt, then we can start studying the text better, and then we can explain a number of features like that.
I would not necessarily use such definite language. I think it's compelling, but I don't, I don't think it's enough to convict somebody to take the death penalty. It's very compelling and it's very suggestive. And it leans heavily in that direction, but I wouldn't say it's absolute proof. I would just suggest that as kind of the way to present it, as a cautionary, take it a little back.
Well, I agree. Now, the way you present it and the way I'm presenting this, of course, I'm more careful in what I'm writing. But when you take into consideration the number of such cases, and there is quite a number of such mistakes which you can suggest in this way, and there are quite a number of photographic features, including this feature with the word division marker. We have the same procedure in several Saindhavi manuscripts. So this supports, it is not a proof, but this supports this hypothesis. So if you collect all this evidence, then I think it becomes quite unavoidable to draw this conclusion. And in such cases, I have had similar problems, claiming something which until now nobody has been thinking of, and then people have difficulties to believe it. Well, but I'm not now the one who has to prove this. Actually, if I claim that there is something more probable, then people have to take care and have a look, and then decide which one is more probable. If something which until now we have held for possible is not probable at all, like the suggestions about these linguistic developments, j to y and so on. These are ad hoc solutions which are certainly less credible than what I'm suggesting here. And what I'm suggesting is straightforward suggestion. And there are a number of arguments in favor of this, that the Saindhavi copy must have been the basis for the manuscript which we have available. And this is in line with everything else what we have discovered until now. And then this is very helpful when you proceed producing an edition number 5 or 6, then this helps. Because in the case of Sangrama Juttamo, I won't have now any concern suggesting a conjecture. And I'm suggesting now, if I'm going to produce a new edition, then I will, of course, enter Sangrama Juttamo as a conjecture, in the same way as Doda. And there are several other cases like this, where I won't be now so careful in a way, I won't be so conservative. In this case, I think I present enough evidence to suggest in a new edition that it is better to introduce the conjecture Doda in place of this meaningless Jeta, and I, of course, give all the arguments. But even if you don't agree with this conjecture, I, as an editor, supply all the necessary evidence. This is my own decision, after all. I try to present all the arguments in favor of this argument. Then the readers will have to decide whether I'm right or wrong. It's their own job. But I supply everything what is necessary for them to decide on their own what is better. Yeah? That's very, very important. But I do believe that now the insight that the Saindavi copy was, after all, the ultimate basis for the old Bengali manuscript of the so-called Padma Dharmapada, or the Saindavi Dharmapada, is absolutely crucial. And it helps to solve quite a number of problems. Like Doda. How much time do we have? 15. Okay. So perhaps, yeah, better than to go to questions, yeah.
I understand. Yeah, okay. I can understand that the evidence that you've marshaled for saying that this old Bengali text is based on a Saindavi version of the text. That I'm compelled to think that that's probably right. Maybe there's an intermediary, maybe there's not an intermediary. But certainly there seems to be a good reason to think that it is. Now, based on that, to then go through in a new 5th edition of the text and begin to correct based on that supposition, I think I might not be so cavalier about that. I might try to take it a little bit more slowly in that regard.
I completely agree. I wouldn't prepare now a 5th or 6th edition on the basis of this manuscript. My mission right now is to prepare Prolegomena. That's why I have also called this talk towards a new edition of the Saindavi Dharmapada. We have several reasons. I mean, of course, it is not always easy to suggest conclusive conjectures. Now, in the case of Sangrama Juttamo, I think this is, I mean, you have to accept it. It is too convincing for me, at least in my view. Several others are less convincing. You may find other explanations for mistakes like this. And then the images are really not good enough. So the first precondition for a new edition, in my view, is to get access to the material, at least to this manuscript in Lhasa, in Tibet. The second one, and I still hope, it might be that we have a Saindavi copy there in Lhasa of the same text. And then it will be much more helpful. Then we can really proceed producing a new edition of the text. Yeah, but even this information which I have now collected is enough to make a number of important corrections. I didn't have now time to discuss the matter of there are some absolute forms where Roth, for example, has came to the conclusion we have to read cha at the end. Disregarding the fact that actually even in this copy it is clearly written ta, and we don't expect anything else. And then there are no reasons to suspect such a mistake. There are very many cases where we have tr or tr, where Kohn has decided, no, we don't see the r element, but we actually see it. If you just, even in these blurred images, you can see it. And when you know the scientific tradition, the scientific scribal tradition, then of course you would also expect tr, and you know how it looks like, and I can suspect the way the old Bengali scribe or his predecessor has seen his copy, and of course he has reproduced it. And we have clear evidence that this scribe has been extremely careful to reproduce the GGR element. I mean, this won't be done by any simple scribe. This was done by a professional scribe who was careful enough. I mean, he was not absolutely, he wasn't immaculate, but he has reproduced it consistently. And this is a feature which is quite foreign to any scribe not versed in this script. But of course he was able to read the script. And I suspect that, as I told you, the manuscript was probably written somewhere in Samapura, or in this region, where also other scientific materials were prepared. The Chandra-Alamkara manuscript was also prepared at Samapura Mahavihara. We have close connection. When you start collecting all these puzzle pieces which are dispersed, then you see the picture. As long as you don't collect them and you put them on the table, you can't believe it. Nobody will believe it. And then there is also this inclination to disbelieve, to just, no, it can't be. This is the first reaction, and I totally disagree. In this regard, I plead to sit, carefully read, have a look, and then propose something more credible. If you cannot, then you have to accept and say, okay, as long as we don't have any more credible idea, then this should be taken seriously into consideration. That's my strategy. But concerning a new edition, I won't endeavor a new edition until I'm fully convinced that in Lhasa we don't have a scientific copy of the same text, which will be quite remarkable. But we cannot exclude this because we have part of the Dirghagama there. I mean, why not have also perhaps even the copy which was copied here? It's not impossible. It's not at all impossible.
I mean, if it's in Lhasa,
yeah.
would this have been copied in Lhasa?
No, I don't believe it. It's theoretically it's possible because we have Bengali intellectuals who were in Tibet and who copied books also in Tibet. It could be, but I wouldn't believe because the manuscript is old enough. It's around 12th century. So I suspect that it was preserved, written still in India, and then it was just packed and brought to...
This copy here, this old Bengali copy, was made of if we assume that you're correct, a scientific copy in Bengal. It was copied in Bengal.
I didn't get the question.
This copy was made in Bengal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So the scientific original must have been in Bengal.
Yes. In the same way as these other scientific materials must have been in northern India, but we find them now in Tibet. And one of the manuscripts we find on the way to Tibet in Kathmandu.
Well, the problem I have is the Bengal-Sindh connection.
The Bengal-Sindh connection is based on the fact that in eastern and northeastern India, in today's Bangladesh, in Vikramashila, we had Samitiya communities. In these areas, they used this script as well. So I suspect that towards the end of Buddhism, so to say, in this period, in that area, some guy was asked to write a copy of the scientific Dharmapada based on a scientific copy, and they wrote this. I'm even prone to believe that this is a direct copy from a scientific, we cannot prove it. But
what I'm saying is you have a scientific Samitias in northeastern India.
yeah,
Having come originally from southwestern India,
Well, but this may have been centuries ago. I mean, we have Samitiya Buddhists who stayed there.
But what I'm saying is that they either brought these manuscripts with them, and they were copied there, and then transported to Tibet, or I'm not understanding.
The scientific materials which we have, which were written most likely in the 12th, 13th century, they were all produced in northern India. At least one manuscript was written in Nalanda. We know this for sure because it's written in the colophon. We know that people, Samitiya Buddhists, obviously, used this script in this period in northern India. They had this traditional connection with Sindh, but they were long ago already elsewhere. They were in northern India. They kept the name Saindavi and Sindh in memory, and they called themselves Saindava and Saindava. Because in Saindavi they called themselves actually Saindava.
So where did the script originate?
Well, that's a different question. The development of the script is, of course, another matter, and I don't have a proper answer yet. My strategy was first to analyze, to study the script synchronically, to describe everything what we have systematically, to understand the system, to understand the logic of the script. And to study it properly. And then, if possible, then we may try to go back. But this is incredibly difficult right now because we don't have all the sources. All the sources which we have in this script are actually written in the 11th, 12th, 13th century at the latest. Only within this period. We don't have older examples. And that's why it's a bit difficult to say. It may be that the script originated in the Sindh region. It may be. I'm not in a position to go into detail. I don't have evidence.
I mean, that's the connection that I made. And then the manuscripts that we have, many of them are deposited in Lhasa, right?
Well, we have just a few manuscripts. Some of them were discovered in Tibet, and at least several are now in Lhasa. Well, the Samitiya Buddhists were compelled to leave northern India as at the time of the Muslim invasion, and they, of course, packed their valuable books and went mostly via Kathmandu to Tibet. The Chandralamkara manuscript was left in Kathmandu because I guess we had a big fan club of Chandra specialists in Kathmandu, so they didn't allow the manuscript to go further, so they kept it there. And the other Samitiya works were transferred further to Tibet, and they were studied there, and so much so that the Tibetans even prepared paleographical script tables of the script. I mean, they were certainly quite interested in this matter, and we have in the Tibetan historiographical literature references to the Sendapas. So there was interaction between the Samitiya Buddhists who came from northern India, most likely in the 12th, 13th century, with the Tibets. So we have pretty much evidence there. So this is quite clear. The name Saindavi is perhaps just a historical name, the memory of the origin of the place of origin of the Samitiya school, which is said to have originated indeed in western India, in the region of the lower Indus River. But in the same way we have in Southeast Asia also Sinhala traditions. They just took over the name Sinhala because they belong to the same tradition of the Sinhalese Theravada Buddhists. So I mean, names kept like this. Sure.
This manuscript which you got from Göttingen is from Rahul collection. So what does Rahul ji say about that? Which script he mentions? Sorry, I was not here, so maybe you have said about that.
No, I didn't elaborate on this, but at the time it was current to refer to this script as Magadhi. Yeah, so it was just the Magadhi script. But you see in his catalog many manuscripts which are written in Magadhi. Not necessarily, but I said already that this is, according to my categorization of the Bengali script, this is early old Bengali script of the 12th century.
You are mentioning 12th century, so you have charts which you have Bengali script, and you are working on one manuscript, I am also working on similar manuscript. The same script.
They're very similar, indeed. Yeah.
So it is something like a variety of old Bengali.
Well, this is a precursor, a predecessor of the proper Bengali script, because we still don't see the characteristic features of the Bengali script.
That's why Rahulji thinks it is.
No, at the time, Rahul has been just conventionally using the term Magadhi without any differentiation. Later people started using Proto-Bengali, but then it was quite messy, and that's why I wrote some years ago this article about the Bengali scripts, trying to get a bit further there. And according to my categorization, this is at the border between Proto-Bengali and early Old Bengali script.
As you know, some of the manuscripts were actually written in Tibet in different scripts, maybe old Bangla script, I do not know exactly. Because, for example, Rahulji mentions Vibhuti Chandra, who copied a number of manuscripts, and also he composed some texts like some stotras, etc., ascribed to him. And so he says that, Rahulji says, I have become familiar with Vibhuti Chandra's handwriting. So I don't know whether this also belongs to that, the copyist, or is Vibhuti Chandra or so on. Is it something like there in the colophon?
I haven't checked the Chandra handwriting properly. Of course, we cannot exclude, the question was already raised, that this manuscript could have also been written in Tibet by a Bengali hand. It is possible. Yeah. I'm afraid we cannot prove it unless Vibhuti Chandra's handwriting is the same, but I think it's not the same. As far as I remember, it's not the same. Okay. So he has a peculiar handwriting, so we can
and
differentiate.
It is peculiarly Bengali handwriting.
Yeah. So in most cases, I would guess rather that these manuscripts were prepared in northern India in the same way as the scientific materials. At least one of the manuscripts, the Abhidharma Samuchaya Karika, was prepared in Nalanda. It is explicitly said there. And these manuscripts were just packed by the fleeing monks and brought to Tibet via Kathmandu.
Is it a palm leaf manuscript?
It's a palm leaf, yeah.
Okay.
It's very similar to the one which you're using. Yeah. Any other questions? No suggestions? If not, then perhaps we should make a break and continue with the next speaker. Yeah. Tomorrow. Okay. All right. Okay. I was ready for more. Yes. Yeah. Well, I was that much challenged by him, so I know. But we'll continue the struggle tomorrow. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Dimitro. On behalf of the Institute, the IGNCA, and of course the participants, I thank Dr. Dimitro. Thank you very much. For tomorrow, there is a slight change in the schedule. The first session, the first part of the first session will be conducted by Professor Bahulkar on editing Buddhist tantric texts. But after tea break, that is at 11:45 a.m., Dr. Shilpa Sumanta will deliver lecture on a critical edition of the Karma Panjika, a priestly manual in the tradition of the Paipalada Shakha of the Atharva Veda. So with this, we now conclude our fourth session of first day, and we will again meet tomorrow at the same place. Thank you.